So I think executives have to be comfortable with this idea that everything we just spent the last 10, 15, 20 years learning is now doing you a disservice, because you really have to be able to turn to a fresh
Yeah.
page and say, okay, where is my audience? What are they doing? What are my hypotheses? How am I going to measure this?
There's a moment in this conversation where Alisa Scharf, Chief AI Officer at Seer Interactive, names the first question she asks every new client who comes in asking how to win at AI visibility. The question is not what you'd expect, and it changes what winning even looks like. Welcome back to No Hacks. My guest, Alisa, runs AI practice across every Seer client account. Her research at scale, 15,000 prompts and more than 500,000 pages, found that websites earning the most ChatGPT citations are the ones with the lower domain authority, which is the opposite of what every mainstream tool has been telling you for a decade. And she's been publicly downgrading citations as a metric in real time on LinkedIn, calling them, in her own words, akin to page 2 Google rankings, a leading indicator, not a business outcome. A few weeks ago, I had Will Reynolds on the show, Alisa's CEO at Seer, for the conversation about why AI visibility is a vanity metric. That was the vision level take. Alisa is the practitioner one layer down, the person walking through what the foundation actually looks like, with the data showing why most brands are chasing the wrong target. We talked about defensive versus offensive AI visibility work, what the brand accuracy audit actually is, why LLMs recommend a brand only about 2.3% of the time, the catastrophic state of agentic browsing tooling, the Supabase pattern of agents picking what gets provisioned on a user's behalf, and what marketing teams need to restructure if they want to keep up. Here's Alisa Scharf. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to No Hacks. It is a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
So let me ask you about AI visibility. That seems to be the hottest thing online now for the last 6 months, for maybe a year. When a new client comes to Seer and they ask you about AI visibility, how to win at AI visibility, because that seems to be the popular question, what do you ask them back? What's the first question you fire back?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the first thing I want to know is, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you, and who is asking? Because often, I mean, we've got a bit of a luxury right now in this industry where in the past, I don't know, decade or 2 decades, people get SEO, they get the value, and the C-suite's like, I don't need to hear about it. Just do your thing, make your money. And now AI is just so top of mind for everybody. So we've got this resurgence of CEOs, going on ChatGPT and doing the what's the best X for Y prompt. So they are placing that pressure on their team. So often people come to us and it's like, well, we want visibility in these results. It's like, all right, well, where is that going to show up on a scoreboard? Because you're not going to get a ton of traffic. The direct traffic you are going to get, it might convert pretty well, but it might convert well because it's not actually a great qualified lead, and it might waste your salespeople's time depending on what industry you're in. So I think really trying to understand, what is the culture that we are selling into? Is it a data-driven culture? Is it a culture that is happy to test and learn and understands that there is not a playbook where it's like whoever can write the biggest check is going to get the playbook and win? It's like, we're all finding this out together. And we try to posture ourselves as such, as, hey, we're testing, we're learning, we're going to try to keep you, moving with us. But at the end of the day, this is still a very experimental channel. And it's really hard to say, yes, here's the path to win.
Of the fact that when a client asks, I want to buy this from you, you ask them why, which is not the most common way to sell things, but it's the only correct way, because usually you're not sure if they know what they're after. And maybe it's not just those best X for Y or whatever else. I really like that. Now, you posted about this a few months ago that Will Reynolds, CEO of Seer Interactive, he was on the podcast a few episodes ago. Go and listen to that, please, because it was a great episode. He does the Tell Me About Brand prompts. He's been running those for Seer for 3 years now, 2.5 years now, a very long time. And when you run this on a huge company, a Fortune 500 client, versus a startup that doesn't have as much presence online, what are the failure modes? What's the difference in those failure modes that you notice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, I think an enterprise or a brand that has a lot of name recognition is going to have a ton, most likely is going to have a ton of traction in the training data of the model. So there's going to be a pretty good idea of what that model is and who they are. Whereas with a startup or maybe a smaller business like Seer, we find that there's a belief of who Seer is and what Seer represents, some of which is like, wow, that is spot on. They are really nailing this. Other things are like, this isn't technically true. You know, like we used to have a San Diego office. We don't anymore. We're still heavily associated with San Diego. And then there's another category or degree of, I hate to call it misinformation, but at a certain point, it kind of is that. And we've been doing some analysis on the Seer brand. An example I'll give is Seer is not known in LLMs for having a proprietary data tech approach, which is kind of like one of the criteria we think ChatGPT is looking for. Like you're a digital agency, you should have some digital agency tool that people like. And we're like, wait a second, we've invested literally millions of dollars in this data infrastructure. It has always been a part of our core. Have we done everything we could to tell that story both on our website and on third party websites? Not really. And I think that's what we're fighting against now. So you really have to wade through. If you're an enterprise brand, there may be a deeper understanding of who you are and what you're about. Even that could be outdated though, because so much of this is, it's based on the training data, or it's based on information that may not actually still be accurate.
Yeah, this is the fact that LLM suggested Seer doesn't have all of that stuff. I read your blog. It doesn't really
Right.
make sense. You sit on so much data. Something that Will also mentioned, you don't publish as many blog posts, but you make them really count and really matter. I think that's better
Mhm.
for this LLM era than just pushing out content that nobody really asked for. Now you have, I think you call defensive positioning with AI visibility, and I'll just say, as I told you earlier, offense wins games, defense wins championships, always and forever. All those best X for Y or just best X prompts and trying to rank for that by writing shallow articles, or even not shallow, but topical articles, that's fine. But if the LLM doesn't know who you are, doesn't know your brand, doesn't know your identity online, that's a bigger problem than just trying to build on sand, essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this was really a trial and error thing that we figured out. And we started selling, I tell this story often, we started selling geo services fairly early. And we had the market, we had our clients, we had prospects coming to us saying, I hear this is a thing. What do I need to do? And I was leading a lot of that work. I was like, I don't know. People, and this is still true today. The people who invented this technology don't fully understand how it works. So we had that kind of insecure moment of, well, who are we to try to optimize these platforms? But because we were so early to it and Will was so bullish on testing for the Seer site, we did start to see threads that worked. And so that gave us some confidence. But still, what we started with in selling to clients was we want to rank for what is the best X for Y. So that's where we start. And it's like, this is interesting. And, if we update content and make sure the content is fresh and we've got the right schema that's telling the story of, what exactly this business is and what their services are, seems like you can get kind of far. But we were hitting this kind of invisible wall when we started to take a step back and kind of reverse engineer what the models thought the best answer might be. We often found, just like the situation with Seer, it's like, wait a second, the model doesn't understand that you're a payroll provider that actually does have a great collection of integrations, but you don't talk about it very well, or it's on a part of your site that's written in JavaScript, and so it's not especially indexable or crawlable. It's like, wait, if we can change the opinion of the model and make it so that it understands what is objectively true about the brand. And by the way, it's not objectively true that they're the best X for Y, right? So, like, you can say, hey, a lot of people like the service, but let's try to stick to the facts. And that seemed to be levers that we could just get more of a handhold on and start to see better progress than if we're, swinging for a home run every time.
I love that. It's really about is this a website where I'm getting my answer from because there's an answer there? Or is this, when I'm in this bucket, is this brand that always has it? And the LLM knows, for example, to pull Seer when talking about AI optimization, AI visibility. I think it's super important that this defensive work it's boring work. It doesn't give you immediate results. So I get why it's not what people reach for first, but needs to be done. Now, how do you know that defensive work is done on a client?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is creating these brand accuracy audits. And this is fairly new. We've got one complete for Seer. We've started to roll it out to a few clients who are really into kind of alpha testing what we're putting together. But the idea is you come up with a list of criteria, objective criteria. Again, it can't be anything that's like, we want to rank for best X for Y. It's got to be, when were you founded? Where are you based? What do you sell? Who do you compete against? And you take that list of queries and see for each model, what is it consistently getting right? What is it consistently getting wrong? And for the areas it's consistently getting something wrong, how do you dig in there? And what I've said from the beginning is we're always looking for these threads to pull on, right? Because we don't exactly know how these systems work or how to approach it, but you can get kind of a spidey sense from pattern recognition, from doing the
Yeah.
searches over and over, where you're like, wait a second, this random website keeps getting quoted. I've never seen it before. Maybe there's something to this. Can we go to this website? If it's got outdated information about the brand, can we update that information? Or even better, what I love to see is when there's something on our clients' websites that's being misinterpreted. Because then it's like, man, you've got full control, right? And yeah, maybe you have to argue or there's some internal politics, but that is way easier than having to change content that's long been published and you don't have a resource for. So you go through that with whatever models matter to your audience. And I think SparkToro is a great tool
Mhm.
for that, to be able to identify, yeah, my audience is on ChatGPT, they're on Claude, they're on Gemini. You go through this brand accuracy work and try to keep moving the needle and hope that you can see a correlation between the areas of brand accuracy with the areas of non-brand visibility you're trying to get. And then you can take something back to the C-suite, to your clients. It's like, hey, there's something here. How much more can we invest in here if it's working?
Yeah, one of the things I love doing for clients is really forcing them to write, not forcing, telling them to write a canonical identity of their organization. Like,
Yeah.
can you just pick organization schema and every field that's relevant, just write down exactly what should be the truth online? And then do
Yeah.
the thing that you said, the audit everything. Where does the LM get it wrong? Why? Where do they get the information from? What do they hallucinate? And then you can start fixing. And also my favorite thing is version control and that canonical identity, which why do we have version control on README files and not on identity of an organization?
Yeah.
It just, I don't have a good explanation for this, but I hope it changes. Yep. But yeah, one thing Seer does is really those research pieces where you publish these long articles with proprietary data. One thing that you found is that DA, domain authority, which arbitrary metric, but a metric that has been around for a long time and people know it. Websites that have a lower domain authority, 20 to 40 domain authority, do better at AI visibility than the ones that have it 80 to 100. How does that, or almost as well, not better. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I mean, I think it is a symptom of how volatile the citation space is. And the words of caution I always use is people like to talk about citations as a metric because it makes sense. People kind of understand where you're coming from with a citation, but it's a really difficult metric to kind of hang your hat on because it's going to change so rapidly and model to model it's very different. So what we found in one study is exactly that. It was more niche websites. It was these very specific pieces of content that were influencing brand visibility. And it felt a lot like early days of the internet because you look at these websites and it's like, well, I would never go here as a buyer of this software or a buyer of this product, but in the training data, in some rule within the post-training data, something was indicating to the model that this is valuable. Our theory, or my theory this whole time has been these models are going to have to really clean up the citations because sooner or later, enough people are going to realize where information is coming from, and it's going to cast a huge cloud of doubt over the viability of the responses that are being generated, right? So if you do see, it's like, hey, there's this, and domain authority aside, it's like, hey, there's this hugely influential website in my industry. We're getting mentioned in Ahrefs, and we're getting mentioned in search engine land, but that's not being cited. What's being cited is some random like, agencyspotter.io. And I don't know any of our customers went there to decide to choose us as their agency. That has to be a thing of the past pretty quickly. And so we try not to get too bent out of shape about these like weird citations, because by the time you figure out what's going on there, you might look the next month and it's like, all right, now we're back to Reddit or we're back to YouTube.
Yeah, Reddit is back now. Reddit is the number one citation source. It was down,
Mm-mm.
it was up, it was down, now it's up again. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it's Wild West. It feels like early days of search, I would say. Not just specific, but
Mm-hmm.
early days of Google, and let's say Google because it's the search engine. And this is why I feel like people who were there in SEO when Google was growing, there's nobody in the world better qualified to solve this than people
Yeah.
who are curious enough, technical enough, want to be proven wrong enough, all that stuff, because mistakes will be made, obviously, doing all this.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel about that citation data in the LMs that's all over the place sometimes being used as a leading indicator of what's going to happen?
Yeah. It's I think it's very frustrating because, as somebody who has lived through eras of SEO where you don't fully understand the business value or you're not in the right rooms, and so you're looking at metrics that make sense to track, certainly, but don't necessarily tell the right story, it reminds me a lot of when we used to report on keyword rankings, right? And the front page of our SEO report was, here's all of our page one rankings and how things moved up. It's like, okay, well, what about the impact to the business? And it's like, well, that's a harder story to tell because I can show you how organic search traffic is going up, but then it's a little harder to connect it back to the work that I'm doing. So I'm not totally going to get credit for it. So let's start here with what I've got more influence over. Except I would argue that citations are an even worse metric than page one visibility because they don't necessarily indicate that your brand is mentioned in that response, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. And so we think of it as a leading indicator where it's more akin to being on page two or page three of Google, where there's something here, like this is good. I'm not going to argue that. If there's a prompt that your audience is using, maybe you're not mentioned in the response, but your content is cited, that's a good place to be. But it's a good place to be because there's different threads to pull on then, where it's like, okay, if I'm important enough and this content's relevant enough to be cited, how could it be improved or optimized so it tells a better story about my brand? Or, looking at the other citations, what other information is covered? How can I create more of this content? I think because AI search, especially, is such a difficult thing to measure with organic search, I feel like we created so much value. And I say this as, I feel like a boomer SEO saying this, but we created so much value that we were only pointing to a fraction of it when you're looking at organic search traffic and revenue. Forget all the impact we had on brands that wasn't trackable. But it's like, no, we can point to something. Those are big numbers. We're doing something good. You don't have that luxury in AI search. There's nothing to point to. You might be getting some referral traffic. You're probably getting some referral conversions, but I think that's probably 10 or 20% of the story. And the real story is how you're influencing your buyers and they're coming back, and you might see it in direct traffic. You might see it in branded paid search traffic, but that's a difficult story to tell, right? And then you've got to talk to your branded or your paid search team about kind of sharing credit. And they're like, no, we don't want anything to do with that. This is all our stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
I think branding works better with organic than paid because human nature. If you're
Mm-hmm.
paying to show me this, like maybe I shouldn't trust you blindly. At least that's how
Right.
I operate. Uh, you had another post that said that LLMs recommend a brand only 2.3% of the time. That
Yeah.
seems super low. Can you explain
It's crazy.
what that is? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a different, I just love a maturity model. And I think I see the maturity model forming, right? There's the citation where your web page is mentioned. There's the mention where you've got your brand in the response and you're trying to figure out, maybe you're trying to pick 4 different banks to choose and your bank is one of them. That's good. But rarely is ChatGPT or Claude or any of these models specifically saying you should go with X. The more you have a
Yeah.
conversation, the deeper you get, it's more likely to get to a recommendation. But a lot of people just take whatever the first response is at face value and don't even get to a clear recommendation. And it was actually a client of ours, and we're so lucky to work with clients who push us to think even bigger than we currently think, and their exec team to give them even more credit. They're like, all right, this is great. And I get it. I'm not like looking for a different dashboard. Mentions are great, but what about recommendations? Because when I'm doing my searches, I am seeing some recommendations come up. And so, first of all, we're excited because it's like, whoa, that's a good idea. How do we test that? Second of all, we're like, all right, well, what is the benchmark for you and your brand? And it comes back and it's like 2%. We're like, oh no, that seems
Wow.
really bad. But when you look at the rest of the competitive set and it's like, 2.5% average, it's like, okay, this is interesting. So this is what success looks like. So if we can get you to 3 or 4%,
A
what's the
different
impact of
story.
that going to be?
Yep. And this
Yeah.
was just to mention the person that Sonny Vasquez from your team led this
Sunny
study. Yeah.
Baptist.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, with this study.
Uh, Impressive that it's this low. If you ask people, not even on the street, at a conference, at a GEO, SEO, whatever conference, and
Mhm,
then you tell them it's 2.3%, I'm
mhm.
I'm sure most of them would be shocked because I was surprised to see that this number is so low. So
Yeah.
that part is really about visibility, discoverability, referral traffic, all that stuff. Let's talk about agentic browsing for a second. One of the things that I'm most interested as a former web developer, my take is that we've been building the websites the wrong way for 20 years, and now it's showing because now
Uh-huh.
it's obvious that they're broken. Uh, you posted about no tools in this space, and there's one. We mentioned it before the recording. Cloudflare
Mhm,
has a, and I think it's a vibe coded tool that they just released
mhm,
because they needed something, but okay, it's better than nothing.
mhm,
Agentic readiness tool.
mhm.
Why is there such a gap, not just in tooling, but why is there such a gap in that part of the agentic experience? Because yeah, discoverability, referral, all that's SEO, GEO, AEO, whatever you want to call it. That
Uh-huh.
AI goes to the website and tries to do stuff. Why
Mhm.
isn't there more talk about that part?
Yeah, it's a really good question, especially when you see the moves that Google is making, like
Oh,
just recently
yesterday.
at
Oh,
Google I/O. I mean, this universal shopping cart
yeah.
idea, they're trying to push more consumer applications of using agents. And public opinion about AI is so negative right now. I do think some of these things are going to take a little while. But to your point, this is already happening when you think about, we're seeing it most in what's kind of interesting is in terminal action. So if you're a brand like Supabase or maybe MongoDB, and people are going back and forth in Claude code, you're probably a vibe coder. You don't really know right from left in this space. And Claude Code tells you, hey, you should use Supabase. I'm like, all right, go ahead, like do whatever you need to do. That's an agent running off on my behalf, setting up an account or opening up the screen so I can, type in my credentials. I think the reason that we are so far behind in this space right now is first of all, it was one of those gradually, then suddenly
Yep.
things, right? To your point, this is not a new problem, but agents were kind of just a glimmer in our eye even a
Absolutely.
year ago, right? And that's for us who's so in the weeds on all of this. And I think the market is catching up more quickly than they did with AI search because you see a lot of VC money being pushed into this space. But almost every tool I try, it's like, oh, submit your website. We're going to do this check. And you do the check, and it's like, is this an AI search visibility report? Like, you're not telling me anything about agents. And the reason I think we work with a great partner called Check, a CHEQ, and I've learned a lot from our VP of Analytics, John Lovett, on this whole subject. One of the key issues is so many of these agents don't self-identify. So you want to be able to look at a dashboard, and some of them do, right? ChatGPT has a few different, Claude has a few different. So to some degree, you can look at your log files and see which bots are visiting your site. But often, if these bots are not self-identifying, it's like, well, I don't know, the internet's a crazy place right now, right? So there
Agreed.
could be
Yeah.
bots trying to be malicious. There could be bots trying to support my, user story, trying to sign up for a Supabase and everything in between. So I think that is the key thing to solve right now, that diagnostic work to try to identify at least current state based on the rules you have set up, based on how you're allowing bots to even access your site. What does that look like? But we have this whole be seen, be believed, be chosen
Yes.
mentality where it doesn't just stop at visibility. And there's a lot of brands who I think maybe never need to worry about this, right? That
Absolutely.
where
Yes. Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, it's not going to be a thing. Your audience isn't going to be doing this, but probably more brands than realize need to be thinking about this. Like a Macy's, I think you probably need to be thinking about a department store, that kind of thing, because especially from the shopping component, these bots are going to need to be able to not just see what products you offer, but what inventory looks like, what shipping looks like. It's going to need to know every single piece of information that a customer would need to know in order to put it in this universal shopping bag. And then my heart kind of breaks for these businesses because then it's like, well, if you do all that work and you set up you invest in all the data infrastructure you need to, but you're not the cheapest product and there's no reason to buy from you for any kind of loyalty rewards or anything, then you're probably going to get sniped right at that last minute.
It's going to be so weird. I'm glad you mentioned Supabase. I had a chat with Will about Supabase. And that's when we both actually realized that, wait, we're getting Supabase every time we're building an app. And there's something, I went on
Yeah.
a very deep dive into what they're
Cool.
doing, how they're doing it. I can share details about this as well. But basically, they're what's called a Postgres development platform. That's their slogan.
Uh-huh.
And when you think about it, for most people using Supabase and provisioning Supabase now, they don't know what Postgres is, but Cloud
Yeah.
Code does. So they're
Yeah.
not talking to the human behind the agent; they're talking to the agent. And now with Stripes, was it Skills? What Stripes? No, not Skill. They launched something recently where you can provision a product. You can give your agent a
Mhm.
wallet, and it can spend on stuff. This is going
Yeah.
to move much faster. I had my previous guest was Matt Billman from Netlify. They're going all in on being agent first. They're talking about
Yeah.
agent experience, how to provision Netlify, how to use that Netlify, and it's working for them. And of course, tech
Mhm.
is the first sector to do this, but this is not going to stay limited to tech. I'm willing to make that bet. But the tooling is catastrophic. We completely agree on that. I mean, Google has that new check for agents where they check for LLMs.txt.
Mhm.
There was a big debate this week about whether that's an SEO thing or not.
Always.
But I think SEO people missed the point there because that was not an SEO instruction. I think LLMs.txt is just wishful thinking at this point. Yes,
Sure. Yeah.
it's a proposal. It's not even a standard. But
Mhm.
we were not talking to you SEO people. This was something else.
Mhm.
And that's a very
Mhm.
important distinction to make.
Yes.
One thing that I talked to Will about, and you had it in a post, you see all of your clients losing organic traffic, like 30 to 80%.
Mhm.
Will share that Seer lost 80% of organic traffic over 2 years, which you're an SEO agent. Like it's not supposed to happen to you. If it happens to you, we're all dead.
No.
All the rest of us.
Mhm.
How should people deal with that? Business
Yeah.
wise, talking to their boss, talking to their client. What should the approach be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a new reality. And I don't know how many favors we have done ourselves as SEOs to earn the trust to say, hey, trust me on this one. But if you look at the situation, a lot of brands, including us, had invested in top funnel informational content. And the primary goal should have been to help your users. But a very close number two goal is okay, and this is going to help search engines understand who we are, what we do, how we think. Now that so many of those searches are met with a zero click SERP, where maybe we're cited in an AI overview, and I do think there's nuance here, right? There are situations where you're searching for something, you have the option to just stay on the zero click SERP, or it's a click that invites a query, or a query that invites a click, and you do need to learn more. You do need to continue on to a specific website. And a good example of this is we have a post about how do you set up your AI search traffic as a channel in GA4, which I think now they solve
It
natively,
just
but for
did,
a
I think, a
while.
few days ago. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but for a while it was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's
It was
just an easy
impossible.
regex thing, but
Yeah.
most people, a lot of people didn't know how to do it. And so that's the kind of citation where it's like, yeah, somebody's going to click through that to get the information. Eventually maybe the regex, everything they need is just on the SERP, and there goes our traffic. Now you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, okay, now this has zero value to me and my business, and this is all wasted effort. Or you can say, well, that person who had a problem, found their solution, maybe in the back of their head, they're going to remember that it came from Seer, and maybe that's a future client, maybe that's a future employee of ours. But that's a really difficult thing because it doesn't live on a scoreboard, right? And the scoreboard, every metric we're used to is like, meanwhile, it's going down. The
Yep.
good thing for Seer and many of our clients is even if our traffic's going down, revenue might be flat or revenue and leads might even be going up. So part of the realization, and this came straight from Will, part of the realization we've had over the last few years is, this is not our core channel. And we've always kind of known that, right? As in we ranked number one for SEO agency. And then the types of clients that hit us up is like, they don't have the budget. Maturity wise, they're not quite there. They're not that enterprise fit that we're really after. But there is still some opportunity there. I think a lot of that opportunity has shrunk. And now we want attention, even if it's just a fraction. We want that attention on LinkedIn. We want that attention on social. We want that attention through live events. So I think executives have to be comfortable with this idea that everything, it doesn't feel good, but everything we just spent the last 10, 15, 20 years learning is now doing you a disservice because you really have to be able to turn to a
Yeah.
fresh page and say, okay, where is my audience? What are they doing? What are my hypotheses? How am I going to measure this?
It's a completely different world, and almost like AI should be used more as a branding tool. AI search should be used more as a
Mhm.
branding tool than performance marketing channel. Almost the search was closer
Absolutely
to
correct.
that. It was closer to PPC than it was to branding. Traditionally, it's organic search. They kind of go hand in hand. They were
Mhm.
almost the same thing. So how to change that? Like an organization that's just focused on other channels, but like organic and PPC, and that's all we do. This is how we make money. What's the mindset shift that needs to happen here
You mean for the agency that's
for
selling those services?
agency or the client of an agency, whoever it is? Yeah.
I think you've got to be able to evolve, first
Hmm.
of all, because I think one core issue that doesn't come to mind immediately for most people, but is going to be a core issue is you're not going to be able to attract the talent you need to win if you are doing yesterday's tactics and only focused on yesterday's channels. Unless you are so extraordinary and you're in the top 1% of this stuff and you've got this very specific lane of industry or service offering that you're going after. But if you really want to be a consultant and an advisor to a client, I think you have to kind of move where the market is moving. And it doesn't necessarily mean do it all. Like for many, many years, we've known our clients do email marketing. They're frustrated with email marketing services. And we've always been like, it's interesting, but we don't have that expertise. I don't think that's an area we want to get into. But I think you mentioned this earlier on. This SEO and paid search holistic skill set is really, really helpful with AI search because we've been through so much of this before. And so much of it is, now you kind of have you've got the full answer key from all the DOJ trials with Google. So you kind of know what's going on
Yep.
under the hood. But for many, many years, we didn't. And we had to go by, what John Mueller or Matt Cutts is telling us. And that wasn't always the right direction. So you've always had to kind of read between the lines and have your own spidey senses develop. So now I think if you've got people who are really good at that, now evolving them to think about AI search is really critical. And if for no other reason, then all of this sits on a layer of search engines, right? These things are not able to be devoid of each other. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I think there always is going to be a need for LLMs to validate what they believe, in quotes, with what's actually present on the internet today that is relevant to this conversation. So there's always going to be that role for search.
I completely agree. And also looking at the way LLMs respond, sometimes they do the RAG thing, sometimes they don't. I think just
Right.
tracking if that happens or not for a specific
Mhm.
question is important for a brand because
Yes.
it tells you what you need to do. Do you need fresh data,
Mhm.
topical data, or can you just need to do better to get in
Mhm.
that training data set? This is really interesting. You mentioned email marketing is a completely different channel. Can a channel silos can that still be a thing moving forward? Can anything be a completely separate thing in an organization, or does everyone now have to work together?
I think there is no way you can run a functional marketing team that exists solely in silos. And there's always going to be a need for bureaucracy and internal politics when you are dealing with lots and lots and lots of people, especially smart people with opinions and different perspectives. So I don't think there's an ideal state where it's a utopia and everybody, lives in perfect harmony. But there is so much valuable information that each one of these different groups holds, not just for the purpose of like growth marketing, right? Where there's insights email marketers have about your existing customers relative to your prospects. There's so many insights search marketers have. But the other thing that I'm hearing that's really interesting is as search marketers, we've always been, getting our hands dirty in spreadsheets or building little scripts or automations. And so we've adopted a lot of these AI tools really willingly. Not everybody, but I see a lot of SEOs leaning in. And then when you do kind of open the door and see what's going on with email marketing or brand or corporate comm, and they're like, oh, what is this meeting recorder that's present here? Or, oh, what do you guys like? You're actually using your Copilot subscription. It's like, okay, there's a lot, this tide can raise all ships if everybody's on the same page with visibility and alignment into what this future can really be.
Yeah, this is I've never seen so many mid-career SEO people happy like they are now because
Yeah.
this is a toy for them. This is bringing
Yes.
them to the youth days from 20 years ago, and now I can do this thing again, and I can do it properly with all the knowledge I have.
Yes.
It's beautiful to see, and I've been trying to get as many SEO people on the podcast lately because I think the most important group of digital professionals is SEO people right now. If you are going to get us out of this and into the clear seas. If you
Mhm.
don't know, one will. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. So let's talk about if a brand has been doing the non-AI approach for the last 15 years, and most have, and now they're trying to catch up, and they haven't been consistent online. They haven't been telling the same story. How do they catch up? Like, how do they fix all that's been done in the past? Like, what's the playbook there?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I think it's highly dependent on how much top down buy in you have and what the internal culture is you're selling into, as well as who is your audience, what is your business model. If you're in publishing, all the odds are stacked against you. And so I think that's a very, very different digital strategy to deploy in 2026 versus if you have a small business, your audience is kind of emergingly adopting more of this technology, you've got more of a roadmap, and I think you have a little bit more time. I think still starting with the brand accuracy work, if you want to be visible in AI search, that is such an important thing to do. The other thing, and this applies to any kind of organization, and sometimes enterprise brands are most guilty of this, is positioning work. There's a lot of brands
Yeah.
who have been like, we're a household name, everybody knows us, we're for everybody, we're this conglomerate. And then when we have these brand accuracy interviews and conversations and try to get, okay, what is your UVP? What's the core belief? It's like, it's just corporate jargon. We don't really have one. That's going to be really difficult because these models are trying to be matchmakers, right? They're trying to say, okay, Alisa, this is specifically what you're looking for and who you are, and I'm going to get the perfect option. And if there's one brand that actually is a pretty good option, but it's not clear it's for me, and there's another brand that's smaller, more niche, and is exactly for me, maybe I should have gone with brand one because they've got better pricing, better resources, or whatever. But those more niche brands are often winning. And so doing that work, starting that conversation of, hey, this is going to be something we need. Let's get the board on board with this. How do we start this process? Because that's the kind of thing you could spend years arguing about what your positioning and UVP is, especially if you've had the luxury of selling to everybody. And
Yep.
it's like, take as long as you need, but we're not really going to be able to move the needle until some of this foundational stuff's done.
I think the fact that in 2026, people still need to ask who they are. Like brands need to ask who they are before they can proceed. It's just mind-boggling. And another guest on this podcast, Jess Schultz, you probably know her, at least online. Well, I think it's something that a question she asked me was something like, how come mad men were better at branding with no tools than we are into 21st century? It's just mind-boggling how we took the shortcuts and everything with the pay traffic and the meta ads and just made these people richer while we forgot and ignored the basics. It's crazy. Future looking questions, a question 12 months from now, when you're looking back, the listeners are looking back, what's the one thing that we're doing now that's going to be proven wrong, most likely to be proven wrong in 12 months?
I think I don't have, of course, I don't have my crystal ball, so I don't know exactly where this goes, but I have long been saying we are probably under indexing on Meta and over indexing on ChatGPT. And both, I think, are going to be important depending on who your audience is, especially with Google's announcement yesterday. Now I'm like, how well is this still true? Because the path forward I see for Meta is to get really good with wearables and tap into their existing saturation into a really big audience and have that be their way in. Because you're not going to beat ChatGPT, you're not going to beat Claude right now. That said, if Google gets there first, they could easily win. And either way, I think 3 years from now, Apple probably beats them all when they finally decide to like really wade into this space. But my high level prediction is I think we're going to look back at this data we have, and so many of us are tracking in Copilot or tracking in Grok or tracking in all these different platforms, and we're going to look back and be like, we got it wrong. We thought our audience was going over here. They actually went that way.
The Meta one is pretty good because I wouldn't have thought about that because they have a Zuckerberg problem, I think, that they need to sort out. Like he has an AI CEO now, the project, the metaverse was 70 billion, disappeared and nobody knows where they went and like all that stuff. But if they sort it out, they have the people, they have their Ask Meta in every app they have, which I don't know if people use that, but if that was actually good and people start using it, that's a good answer. My answer is really, I think operating system is above an app, obviously, above ChatGPT, above Anthropic. Google has sorted this out with the announcements they had. I think Apple does this in September when they have their big conference, and then we are not talking about Anthropic and ChatGPT as much. On-device LLMs, all that stuff, that only Google and Apple can do on-device LLMs. And if those are as good as the cloud models, why do we need the cloud model? And
100%.
it'll be interesting. So I would focus on those two, but what else we're getting wrong? I think ignoring, as I mentioned earlier, ignoring the fact that this AI traffic is coming to the website and trying to do something with no human in the loop. Come on, it's impossible to ignore that. That's probably the most important thing moving forward, in my opinion, at least. Okay, where can people connect with you? Other than seerinteractive.com website, what's the best way for people to find you online, follow your work?
Yeah. I try to post a lot on LinkedIn, so I'm very engaged on LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can also find me on Twitter, but you're going to see a little more fantasy football and sports conversation on my Twitter.
I like that. This was an excellent interview. Thank you so much for taking the time. I enjoyed talking to you. And to everyone listening to the podcast, to this episode, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing. Go to nohacks.co/subscribe and subscribe there to the newsletter. And I will talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Now, two things from this conversation are going to stay with me for a while. First, the defensive before offensive framing, the brand accuracy audit that Alisa described, where you pick a list of factual prompts about your own company, run them across the models, and find out where the LLMs are wrong about you. That work is unglamorous and mostly skipped. But take home is small. You pick 5 prompts about your brand right now, run them on ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. Find out what the models know about you, who your customers are, where you're based, who you compete with. The answer is most likely going to be surprising. That's your audit. That's the whole thing. Do that before you spend any time trying to win the category terms. Now, second, the gap Alisa named in agentic browsing tooling that I could not agree more about. There's a real difference between AI search visibility, getting cited in the answers, and agent readiness, making it possible for an agent to actually use your website. Most providers are selling you the first thing, you're calling it the second. And the agent as buyer pattern that Alisa and I talked about with Supabase, where plot code recommends Supabase to a vibe coder and provisions the account on their behalf, that pattern is moving outside tech faster than the tooling is moving to catch it. So if your business is something an AI agent might buy, book, or provision on a customer's behalf, this gap matters now and not later. And if you want weekly breakdowns of where this is going, what shipped, what changed, what to do about it, NoHacks newsletter is the place. So go to nohacks.co/subscribe. The link is also in the show notes. Thank you to Alisa again for the conversation, and I will talk to you next week.